I held the wine glass carefully the way you do when you don't quite feel welcome in a room. Camilla's house was bright, too bright, with white walls, white plates, white napkins, and that long white silk dress she'd chosen for Christmas dinner, as if the holiday were a photo shoot. I kept to the edges. I poured wine, passed dishes, smiled when spoken to. That's what mothers do. We stay helpful. Stay invisible. The bottle was nearly empty when I made my way around the back of the table. My hand brushed the chair behind me, and then only for a second trembled. The glass slipped. Not fast, not violent, just enough. The red wine hit her dress in a perfect splash, centered blooming like a wound across the fabric. Camilla gasped. "Do you even know what this cost?" I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Andrew stood. His voice was sharp, sudden. "Mom, not again." Then it happened. The slap didn't echo. It wasn't loud. It was precise. Quick. A private shame made public. His hand met my cheek, and my body leaned into the blow like it had been waiting for it. The room fell silent. A fork clinked against porcelain. No one moved. I tasted copper. I straightened my back. "I'm sorry," I said to no one in particular. No one replied. I placed the empty glass on the table like it had broken itself and turned toward the hallway. As I stepped back, something silver rolled across the floor. A USB drive. I picked it up without thinking and slipped it into my coat pocket. Outside, the cold air made my eyes sting. My face burned, but not from the wind. I walked to the end of the street before I stopped. I could still hear her voice in my head, still feel the weight of Andrew's silence. I didn't cry, but something in me had shifted. And this time, I wasn't going to wait for it to shift back. When I got home that night, I didn't take off my coat. I sat at the kitchen table with my gloves still on, staring at the checked placemats I'd bought last winter on sale. The silence was thick, like even the air didn't want to disturb me. My cheek still throbbed, not from the pain, but from the memory, from the way no one had said a word, not even Andrew. I thought I had raised a good man, a decent one. I'd worked nights and weekends, sold the flower shop when he got into college. Told him to chase everything I never could. He used to bring me tea when I came home late, a child too small to lift the kettle, insisting I sit while he stirred in honey. Now he wouldn't even meet my eyes. Camilla had always been sharp. Pretty and polished, the kind of woman who wore white to a winter party without worry. She came from money, from a world where dinner parties were performances and people like me were background props. She once told me I smelled like hand cream and old books. I wasn't sure if she meant it kindly, but Andrew used to love the smell of my shop. Lilies, carnations, the paper wrap crinkling under his arms when he helped deliver bouquets. I thought he'd remember that. I thought it mattered. Instead, tonight, I became an inconvenience. A stain on a dress. A problem to be handled. I went to hang up my coat, and that's when I felt it again. The small metal object in my pocket. I pulled it out. The USB drive. I'd forgotten about it entirely. It wasn't labeled. No keyring. Just smooth silver plastic, the kind offices hand out at conferences. I didn't think much of it. Slipped it into the drawer next to the old manuals and warranties, meaning to throw it out later. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Not from the slap, not from the shame, but because I kept thinking, what kind of woman wears white silk to a dinner with red wine? The morning after I found the linen napkin still tucked in my purse, faintly marked with wine. I hadn't meant to take it, but I must have grabbed it when I stood up still dazed. The stain had dried into the fabric, a dull maroon that wouldn't wash out. I thought about soaking it, scrubbing it, saving it. Then I folded it neatly and set it aside. There was something about stains. Once they set, they didn't go quietly. I made tea the way I always did, boiling the water, adding honey, no milk. I didn't touch the jam I brought, still unopened, still wrapped in the red cloth I tied the night before. I had planned to give it to Camilla's parents. They didn't even come. Instead, I sat at the table and stared at the edge of the countertop, where Simon once sanded it smooth. He had hands like mine, quiet, patient. He wouldn't have raised his voice. He certainly wouldn't have raised a hand. Andrew had been different once. When Simon died, he held my hand through the funeral and kissed my forehead afterward like he was the parent. We used to walk through my shop together on Sunday mornings. He'd touch the petals, name the flowers. I kept thinking maybe he'd forgotten how. I pulled open the drawer by the sink and saw the USB again, still sitting where I left it next to an old tape measure and expired coupons. I picked it up and turned it in my hand. No label, no logo, no clue where it came from. I should have tossed it in the bin. Instead, I brought it to my laptop and plugged it in. The screen blinked. Folders appeared, invoices, transfer logs, internal memos. I clicked one at random and saw my name, Marion Delcourt, listed under a vendor file. Consulting services. Payment received, repeated. Dozens of times. But I never consulted for anyone, and I never received a cent. I didn't leave the house that day. The bruise on my cheek had turned a soft gray, the kind that no makeup could hide. I pressed my palm against it, as if I could rub the shame away. It wasn't the slap that hurt anymore. It was knowing how easily it had happened, how naturally he'd done it. The documents on the laptop stayed open. I went through them one by one, trying to make sense of the numbers. Transfers, approvals, routing codes, all signed under my old florist license. Payments dated over the last 18 months, each labeled as consulting services. I hadn't consulted on anything since the shop closed. The room felt smaller. I opened a window, but the air was sharp and cold. Somewhere in those rows of digits, I could see the pattern money moving from one account to another, sometimes through offshore names, sometimes through small charities. And every few lines, her name, C. Ortega. I tried to convince myself it was a mistake, a clerical error, something that could be explained. But I'd seen enough paperwork in my life to know that this wasn't random. It was deliberate. By afternoon, I couldn't sit still. I drove to the small bank where I'd kept my savings since Simon's time. The manager, Mrs. Keene, greeted me kindly, but frowned when she looked at my file. "You're listed on 2 corporate transactions, Mrs. Delcourt," she said. "One under Ward Healthcare and another under a supplier code. Did you authorize these?" I didn't answer. I just felt the blood drain from my face. That evening, I sat by the window watching the streetlights flicker. I found an old card in my wallet, James Holleran, Federal Financial Officer. He'd been a loyal customer of my shop for years. I dialed his number, my hands shaking. When he answered, I said quietly, "James, it's Marion. I need to tell you something, but only if you can promise it stays between us." His voice steadied. "Go on." I took a breath and told him everything. The envelope sat on my table all morning before I took it to the post office. I placed it on the counter with care, as if it might burn through the surface. "Certified mail," I told the clerk. He didn't ask questions. Just weighed it, stamped it, and slid it into the outgoing tray. Afterward, I walked the long way home. Past the old park where Andrew once fed ducks in a blue coat 2 sizes too big. Past the corner store where I used to buy butterscotch candy for Simon on Sundays. Everything looked the same. I didn't. When I got home, I dug through the closet and found the stack of origami paper I kept for the girls' Sunday school. I began folding. First roses, then lilies, then cranes. I needed something to do with my hands. The silence had settled into my bones, heavy and watchful. On the 3rd day, the phone rang. I hesitated before picking up. "Camilla, you went to the bank." She said, her voice as smooth as ever, but with a crack underneath. "They froze our account. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I said nothing. This could ruin Andrew. You really want that? After everything he's built, I still didn't speak. You always wanted attention. I get it. You're lonely. Her words stung, but not in the way she thought. They didn't reach me anymore. If you need money, we can arrange something. She added quickly, quietly. I hung up without a word. An hour later, Andrew texted Mom, "Please, don't do anything else until we talk." I placed the phone face down. The paper flowers had taken over the table, bright little things with no scent, no weight. Pretty, but not real. Camilla didn't know me. Not really. She didn't know how long I could wait, or how far I was willing to go when something mattered. I'd protected Andrew his whole life, but this time, I wasn't sure if protecting him meant staying quiet or making sure he finally saw the truth. Andrew came by the next afternoon. He didn't call ahead, just knocked twice and stepped back like he wasn't sure he wanted me to answer. When I opened the door, he looked like he hadn't slept. His coat was wrinkled hair, messy at the edges, the way it used to get during finals week. "I just want to talk," he said. I let him in. He stood in the middle of the kitchen, eyes flicking toward the stack of paper flowers on the table, but saying nothing about them. "Camilla told me what you did," he began. "She says you misunderstood, that maybe someone used your name without realizing it." I didn't speak. I waited. "She thinks it's a mix-up," he continued, his voice quieter now. "Mom, she would never risk her job. Or mine." I moved to the counter and pulled the folder I'd prepared. No words, just paper. I laid it in front of him. He didn't open it at first. Just stared at the cover like he was afraid of what it might say. Then slowly, he flipped through the pages. Wire transfers. Forged documents, approvals with Camilla's signature beside my name. She said this was temporary. He said barely above a whisper. Some workaround for tax season. I didn't think. His voice trailed off. I leaned back, watching him trace the lines with his finger, like they might disappear if he blinked too fast. "Why didn't you come to me?" he finally asked. Before all this, I could have told him I had. That I'd been coming to him for years, in meals, in holidays, in the quiet things I did, while he looked through me. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Because you wouldn't have listened." He didn't argue. He stayed another hour rereading everything. He didn't touch the tea I made. When he left, he looked heavier somehow. I stood by the door long after it closed. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I'd just lost him or if something real had finally begun to crack open. The headline broke early in the morning, buried halfway down the newsfeed. Ward Healthcare under internal review amid allegations of financial misconduct. I didn't click it right away. I didn't need to. I already knew what was inside. By noon, it had spread. Camilla's name was in the second paragraph. The board had issued a statement. Temporary leave pending investigation. No charges yet. Just pressure mounting like steam behind a closed door. I turned off the notifications on my phone. People I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly interested in how I was doing. The house was quiet. I peeled an orange at the sink, the scent sharp in the air. My hands moved like they used to when I arranged flowers. Precise, gentle, certain. I felt none of those things. Andrew didn't call that day or the next. But on the third morning, my phone rang. His voice was smaller than I remembered. "It's true," he said. "Everything. The accounts, the transfers. She used you." I said nothing. "She told me it was temporary," he continued. "Just until the audit cleared. She said it wouldn't touch anyone else." He paused. I could hear the strain in his breathing. "I defended her," he whispered. "Even after the slap, even after you showed me. I thought you were trying to cause trouble, but you were trying to protect me." My throat tightened. "I always have," I said. There was silence on the line. Not cold, just full, heavy. "They're launching a formal investigation," he said finally. "The board wants a statement from me by tomorrow. The lawyers say I should step down." I closed my eyes. Do what you need to do, Andrew. I'm sorry, Mom. It didn't fix anything. But it was something. After we hung up, I sat at the table and looked at the pile of folded paper flowers. One had started to unravel. I picked it up, smoothed the creases, and folded it again. Not tighter, just cleaner. Outside, the wind shifted. I got up and went to the drawer where I'd kept the documents ready now for what came next. The courthouse steps were lined with photographers, their cameras flashing like static in the cold air. I arrived through the side entrance, escorted quietly by someone from the district office. No one knew my name, not really, but they would soon enough. Inside the room buzzed with low voices and shifting papers. Camilla sat at the defense table, her hands folded, her expression unreadable. She wore a pale suit, hair pulled back tight. Beside her, two attorneys whispered behind a screen of folders. She didn't look at me. Andrew sat further back near the aisle. He was thinner than I remembered, suit-wrinkled eyes shadowed. Our eyes met once, long enough to say what neither of us could out loud. They called me to the stand midway through the morning. The prosecutor was kind, but direct. I spoke clearly, not angrily, just the truth. That I hadn't worked since I closed the flower shop. That I had no knowledge of the vendor account created in my name. That the documents using my florist license were fabricated. That I received nothing, not a cent, not a notice, not a call. I was handed copies of transfers approval forms. I confirmed my name. My signature, or what was supposed to look like it, the handwriting didn't even match. Camilla never looked up. Not once. The defense tried to paint it as a misunderstanding, a clerical error, a shared misunderstanding between relatives, but the numbers didn't lie. The authorizations were too many, too consistent, too profitable to be innocent. When it was Andrew's turn, he took the stand with trembling hands. He admitted he hadn't seen it, that he hadn't wanted to, that by the time he realized it was too late. Camilla's face didn't move, even as the judge read the verdict. Guilty. Multiple counts. Sentencing deferred pending further review, but the outcome was clear. As they led her out, she turned toward the gallery, but her eyes passed over me like I wasn't there. I didn't follow them out. I waited until the room had emptied, until the papers had been collected, until all that remained was the echo of decisions that couldn't be taken back. The house was smaller than I remembered, but the porch still creaked the same way when I stepped onto it. The real estate agent handed me the keys like she didn't quite believe I wanted it back. I didn't explain. I just took them and walked through the door. The wallpaper was gone, replaced by plain white paint. The wood floors still bore the scratches from Simon's old armchair. I ran my hand along the edge of the kitchen counter and saw the dent where Andrew once dropped a jar of jam when he was 9. Time had smoothed everything, but it hadn't erased it. I bought it with part of the settlement. I didn't tell Andrew until the sale closed. He showed up the following weekend with a box of tools and 2 buckets of paint. We didn't talk about court. We didn't talk about Camilla. We painted the living room in silence. He chose a soft, warm beige, nothing trendy, nothing loud. He stayed the night in his old room. It was empty now, just a mattress and folded blankets. I left a glass of water on the nightstand like I used to. The next morning we sat on the porch and watched the sun come up. He didn't say much, just handed me a cup of coffee and looked out over the yard. Later that week he brought my granddaughter. She ran through the grass, her laughter light and unguarded. She asked if I could teach her how to fold flowers out of paper, like the ones she saw in the box near the window. I said yes. We sat on the floor and folded petals together, slow and careful. Andrew watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, eyes soft. It wasn't a beginning. It wasn't a resolution. But it was something in between. A breath. A pause. A place where things could grow again. That night after they left, I walked through each room barefoot, letting the floor remember me. I opened every window, and for the first time in years, I let the air in without fear. Christmas came quietly that year. No invitations, no formal dinners, no white silk dresses, just the three of us. Andrew, my granddaughter, and me gathered in the house that had found its way back to us. I kept the meal simple. A roast, a loaf of bread, a pie I made the night before. We ate at the kitchen table, not a dining room dressed for photographs. The napkins didn't match and no one cared. Andrew brought wine. Red. He hesitated before opening the bottle, glancing at me like he was asking permission without saying a word. I nodded. He poured 2 glasses, slow and careful. When he handed one to me, his hand brushed mine. Not accidental, not apologetic. Just there. We clinked glasses, a small sound. No toasts, no speeches. My granddaughter sat beside me, swinging her legs under the chair, humming a tune from a holiday movie. She reached for a paper flower from the bowl in the center of the table and asked if she could take it home. Of course, I said. After dinner, Andrew offered to wash the dishes. I let him. I sat by the window glass, still in hand, watching the snow gather on the railing outside. The wind had softened the world beyond the glass, hushed and waiting. I looked at the reflection of the room behind me, the light on my face, the tree we had decorated with old ornaments and popcorn strings, the girl in the chair holding a paper lily, the man drying plates without looking for praise. It was not forgiveness, not exactly. It was not forgetting either. It was something quieter, something I didn't know how to name, but it lived here now, in the space between what had been broken and what we chose to carry forward. I took a sip of wine, holding the glass steady in both hands. It was the same shade as the stain on that napkin I'd never thrown away. I didn't taste shame this time. Only warmth. Only the slow return of something I thought I'd lost.